was definitely giving off bitter baby daddy energy. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. Okay y'all, so another one where there's not too much to say at the beginning of the case, but one thing I do have to say is that Missouri is creeping up on us real fast. And if you don't know, after Missouri, I'm doing a Q&A. So please leave your questions in the comment box below. And now let's just go ahead and hop right into today's case because like I said, I ain't got that much to say. And if you've been here for a little minute now, then you already know that we're going from the backwoods to the national forests of America in alphabetical order. So from Alabama to Wyoming, and today we are in Minnesota. So it's April 20th, 2022 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And a woman named Nicole Lenway, aka Nikki, starts her day like normal. She goes home from working an overnight shift as a forensic scientist for the Minneapolis Police Department. And as soon as she gets in the house, she wakes her son up and gets him off to school. Once she gets her son off to school, this is when Nikki takes the time to go to sleep. And she sleeps just up until it's time for her to go pick up her son from school. And once she picks up her son from school, she heads straight over to a parenting center called Family Wise so that he can have his weekly visit with his dad. So Nicole dropped her son off to go visit with his dad, and then she leaves the center to go run errands. You know, go grocery shopping, pick up a few things here and there. Just do stuff that is a little bit easier to do without a toddler tagging along. So Nicole goes to do that, and on her way to pick her son back up, this is when shit hits the fan. Because out of nowhere, as Nicole is walking towards the building, somebody runs up and shoots her twice and then runs off. Nicole had been shot in the neck and in the arm. And as soon as she realizes that she was shot, she calls 911 and she tries so hard to tell the operator what's going on, but you can hear that she didn't have a voice. She could not speak. But luckily, somebody who was waiting at the stoplight seen the whole thing, and she rushed to Nicole's aid, and she ended up taking over the 911 call. And she was able to relay the message that Nicole had been shot and that emergency services was needed right away. And in the meantime, while they waited for the paramedics to get there, this good citizen followed the instructions of the 911 operator and wrapped something around Nicole's neck and applied pressure to the gunshot wound. And when paramedics do show up, surprisingly, Nicole is still conscious and she's able to actually walk herself to the ambulance. However, she wouldn't stay coherent and conscious for long because once they got her into the back of the ambulance, Nicole did lose consciousness. Eventually, Nicole's friends and family are notified and they rush to the hospital where they learn that she's in critical condition, but the doctors say they're gonna do everything in their power to try to save her life. While Nicole is in surgery and the doctors are attempting to save her life, the investigators are back at the crime scene, processing the scene and trying to gather as much evidence as possible to find out who did this. And once investigators learned that her ex, Tim Amaker, is inside the Family Wise Center with their son, Callahan, they know that they need to speak with him. So once the visit is over, they take Tim and they notify him of what just happened to Nicole. And he seems genuinely worried and he asks, is she gonna be okay? And you know, they can't really give any guarantees right now, so they're just like, I don't know. But they ask him, is there anyone who he knows who would want to hurt Nicole? And he tells them that he don't know nobody specifically, but he does know that she had recently been afraid for her life and felt like somebody was stalking her because of a case she worked. And she said that she noticed a car that would just keep driving by her house and she was just overall scared, but he didn't know who she was being stalked by, who was following her, or what case it was that this was all stemming from. Now, as we know, in most investigations, a lot of stuff is happening simultaneously. So while Tim is being questioned about who may have done this to Nicole, other investigators are checking surveillance cameras from all the businesses nearby. And just in case they are able to capture anything on video, they want to make sure that they know what Tim was doing. I mean, they already know where he was at and they want to know what Tim drives. So they ask him like, is this the only car that you own, this Jeep? And he like, no, I also own a Dodge Challenger. And they're like, okay, bet. And so then they finish up questioning with him and then they let him go. Now, I told you that the investigators was getting the surveillance footage from all the businesses around. And when I tell you they saw everything, these cameras captured everything from the moment that Nicole pulled up to go back into the family-wide center to the person running up to her and shooting her, running off. And they even saw the car that the suspect drove off in. The only thing they couldn't do was identify who that suspect was. But they saw that the suspect drove off in a black Dodge Ram. So now they get to work trying to figure out who this Dodge Ram belongs to. So the next day rolls around and Nicole is out of surgery because miraculously, somehow, after being shot in the neck, Nicole survives. She survived this whole ordeal, and she wakes up and she's ready to talk. I don't think she was able to speak per se, but she was ready to tell what she thought and what she knew. And what she told the officers was that she knows that the shooter was a female. However, she just has a feeling in her bones, in her spirit, that this has something to do with her ex, Tim. She just knew that somehow Tim was behind it. So Nicole and Tim had met years prior when Nicole decided to take a Taekwondo class, and Tim just happened to be the instructor. And he was a very well-known instructor too, and he was said to have been really good at what he did. And most of his students called him Master Amaker, and if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of like a high title in the martial arts world when someone calls you master. But nonetheless, he immediately took a liking to Nicole. But initially, she was kind of like, no, I don't think so. But he eventually wore her down and the two of them started dating. Now, people in Tim's circle, some of his friends tried to warn Nicole about his womanizing ways and just, he probably wasn't going to be the best for her. But at this point, he had won her over and what was done was done. The two of them were now an item. But she had to find out the hard way that everything that glitters ain't gold. Because according to Nicole, Tim was not only a cheater, but he was an abuser as well. She said that he would pull her hair, push her up against walls, and just throw things and break stuff in drunken fits of rage. And she said that she stayed because he was up in her head, like he had gotten up in her head and she just felt stuck. He had some type of hold on her where she just felt incapable of leaving. But one day Nicole had just seriously had enough. They was arguing, they had been arguing, and she was over it. So she packed her stuff up and tried to leave, and he snatched her by her hair and dragged her into the bathroom. And when he did that, she just knew that that was her breaking point. And she said, fuck all what you got going on, I'm leaving. And she left for good. And this was in 2015. And once Nicole was all moved out for good, Tim wasted no time bringing somebody else into his home. And that somebody was Colleen Larson, who was an 18-year-old former student of his. Colleen met Tim when she was about 12 years old, when she became one of his Taekwondo students. So he pretty much watched her grow up nasty. And once she became 18, the relationship went further away from student-teacher and more to, I don't even want to call it romantic, because they said that Tim wasn't in love with her. But nonetheless, he and Colleen became an item. And being that Tim moved on so quickly after Nicole left him, she thought she was about to be done with dude forever. However, she ended up finding out that she was pregnant. And when she told him about it, he was like, mm-mm. And for all the little baby ears and the little YouTube censorship, he told her to get a shmush. And Nikki was like, fuck you, fuck no, I'm not. I won't. And she didn't. And in June of 2016, she and Tim welcomed their baby boy, who they named Callahan. And since the two of them wasn't together no more, she and Tim started a co-parenting relationship. Now, Tim, he was a little shaky on his duties at times, but where he lacked, Colleen would kind of pick up. And this didn't bother Nicole because she had already known Colleen as one of Tim's students, so she was familiar with her. And on top of that, Colleen was nice to her son. Colleen loved her son, in fact, and her son seemed to genuinely take to Colleen as well. So she was very comfortable with Colleen caring for her son. And soon enough, Nicole would find somebody to take care of her. Because in the summer of 2017, while Nicole was doing her big one, forensic sciencing on a burglary call, one of the officers who was called to take the report of the burglary was a man named Donovan Ford. And as soon as Donovan laid eyes on that cute ass little forensic scientist Nicole, he knew. It was love at first sight for him. And some way, somehow, he got Nikki to agree to go out with him. And when they went out, they clicked, and they ain't stopped clicking since. But Tim, he wasn't here for the click. He was definitely giving off bitter baby daddy energy, because as soon as another man started spending time with his son, here he go with, "I want to see my son." He was pretty much on some, "I don't want no other man around my son," even though he had another woman all up in their mix. And Tim would take it as far as even calling and texting Donovan. And he would even leave him voicemails like, "Man up, stop hiding behind your badge." And he would send texts telling Donovan that he destroyed his family and all kinds of crazy stuff. Meanwhile, Tim, if it was up to you, according to Nicole, there would be no family to be had. Anyhow, because his little ego was all bruised and whatnot, Tim set out on a mission to destroy Nicole and make her life a living hell. He would end up filing multiple motions against her, and he would report her to CPS on multiple different occasions, alleging that she and Donovan were causing physical harm to their son and essaying him. And y'all, there was even a report in May of 2018 where Tim said that Nicole had run over his foot with a car while he was holding Callahan, causing him to fall with the baby in his arms. But luckily the baby wasn't harmed though. And because of this allegation, Nikki was charged criminally for this, and it went to trial and everything. However, the jury found her not guilty after 1 hour of deliberation, because there was really nothing to substantiate any of his claims. And there was really so much more in those reports. But yeah, because of all of the allegations that Tim was throwing out there against Donovan and Nicole, CPS was in and out of Nicole's house on a regular basis for the better part of 3 years. Eventually, Nicole had had enough, and she ended up filing for an order of protection against Tim. Meanwhile, Tim was filing for sole custody of Callahan. Oh, but please believe, Tim was not only out to get Nicole, he was at Donovan's neck as well. And he would call the police station and throw out so many accusations against Donovan. And all of these allegations had to be investigated. So Donovan was constantly under investigation, but he was constantly being, I guess, exonerated, so to speak, because none of the claims could ever be substantiated. So finally, in 2020, Nicole and Tim went to trial for custody of Callahan. And it just so happened that all of the claims that Tim had put forth against Nicole were all unfounded. And Nicole ended up being awarded sole physical and legal custody of Callahan, while Tim was awarded 1 weekly visit supervised at a parenting center. So yeah, sometimes it's just better to sit there and eat your food, because now look at you. So now, after learning all of what I just told y'all, the investigators felt like Nicole was on something when she said Tim was involved. Even though they know he wasn't the shooter. They just got a little inkling in their little investigative bones that said, yep, Tim is behind this. So now they need to figure out who the shooter was. So they talked to Tim and they like, okay, Tim, so we reviewed some evidence and we seen the suspect drive off in a Dodge Ram, and we also did a little digging into you, and we learned that you own a black Dodge Ram. Sir, why you didn't tell us that when we asked you what kind of cars you own? You said you own a Jeep and a Dodge Challenger, not no Dodge Ram. You skipped that part. And whatever Tim's response was to that, they was side-eyeing the hell out of him. So they ended up showing him still photos of the truck, and he like, yeah, no, definitely not my truck. My truck got Superman decals on it and a license plate. This truck is missing both of those things. And they just like, okay, Tim, you can't just take these decals and the license plates off, but right, it's not your truck. But just in case it is, does anyone else have access to your Dodge Ram? And he like, well, yeah, Colleen got access to it. And they're like, okay, well, is she the only person? He was like, yeah, as far as I know. And so they were like, well, since Colleen is the only other person who has access to the truck, do you think that Colleen could have potentially been the one to do this? And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. Absolutely not. Colleen don't got an evil bone in her body. She is just a kind-spirited, kind-hearted, beautiful young lady inside and out. No, 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 no. It was not Colleen. I know it wasn't. But you know they're going to bring Colleen in for questioning anyways. And when they did, baby girl just denied her little heart out. She said, nope. Wasn't nowhere near. I left the studio and went straight home and was at home the rest of the night. And it was like, all right, bet. So they had to let both of them go because they really couldn't prove anything. But you know they were still going to investigate them. So they decided to pull their phone records and pull the GPS records from Tim's Dodge Ram. Because that car that Tim owned, it had Wi-Fi. And so they could track where it had been. And I think y'all already know what I'm about to say. So once they snatched the cell phone records and got the tracking for Tim's car, they found out that earlier that afternoon, Tim and Colleen was both at the Taekwondo studio. Tim left about 4 o'clock to go to the Family Wise Center so that he could have his weekly visit with Callahan. And you can see on surveillance footage, Tim getting out of his Jeep and going into the Family Wise Center. And at some point after Tim left the Taekwondo studio, Colleen left the Taekwondo studio driving Tim's truck. And she did go home and she stayed there for a little while. But it shows that her cell phone and Tim's truck left the house at around 7 o'clock p.m. and headed to the Family Wise Center. And in surveillance footage, you can see a figure in all black walking up and down, like kind of casing out the area of the Family Wise Center before Nicole comes back to pick up Callahan. And they can tell that this is Colleen because of her cell phone records. So now they have no doubt in their minds that their shooter is Colleen Larson. And on April 28th, 2020, Colleen is arrested and charged with attempted first-degree premeditated murder. And shortly after Colleen is arrested, Tim is arrested on the same charge, plus aiding an accomplice after the fact. And this time, when they got Colleen into the interrogation room, ooh, baby folded like me at a Chris Brown meet and greet, okay? She literally broke down crying and confessed to being the shooter. But she said that it was all Tim's idea, and she did it because she genuinely believed the stuff that Tim was telling her about Colleen. She believed that Colleen was a terrible person who was abusing Callahan, and she was essentially just trying to save Callahan, but at Tim's behest. Meanwhile, Tim just kept on denying his involvement. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't me. Colleen did it clearly. I was at the Family Wise Center. Y'all know that. It wasn't me. So obviously he pleads not guilty and goes to trial. And his trial started in November of 2022. And even with no direct evidence of Tim's involvement, the jury found homeboy guilty on all charges. And he was sentenced to 18 years. Because I forgot to mention that they found out that Tim had altered his truck so that it wouldn't be easily detected. Like, you know, taking the decals and stuff off. Yeah, they knew he did that. But anyway, like I said, he was sentenced to 18 years. And Colleen must have somehow got wind of Tim's sentence because just 4 days after he was sentenced to those 18 years, Colleen pled guilty because she said if they can sentence him to 18 years with no direct evidence of his involvement, baby, they're going to throw the book at my ass. So she pled guilty and ended up being sentenced to 16 and a half years in prison. Now, as for Nicole, there was light at the end of her tunnel because not only did she survive this attempted murder, but she and Donovan are now married with a child. So she is now Nicole Ford, and Callahan finally has the family that he deserved the whole time. Now, hopefully Tim does do his full 18 years, because it was said that if he gets early release for good behavior, he could be out as soon as 2034, and that's literally right around the corner. But either way, whether he gets out early or does his full 18 years, I truly, genuinely pray for Nicole and her family's safety once he's released, because people like Tim seem to be relentless. Like, they don't give up. Hopefully he's just fucking defeated and just go on about his life once he get out. He's gonna be old and decrepit anyway. Not really old, but still. Anyway, y'all, that is all I have for today's case. Thank you all so very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Oh, I need to light the candles. Are we there? Can you hear me? number one, number one. I won't stop until I see you, sugar. You know who you are. I feel like my head looks so little and stuff like this. I really gotta fix my head. Hey y'all, welcome and or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae. If you know why, okay, this eye, baby, I thought we was done twitching. I thought we were over that. This good citizen, she followed the instructions of the 911 operator and applied pressure to the wound on Nicole's gunshot. The wound. When Nicole was taking a But you know what they say, some people gotta get burned before they realize the stove is really hot, you know? Don't nobody say that. Did I say Colleen? I hope I said Colleen. Because in the summer of 2017, I think, let me find out. However, why would you do that? They decided to pull their phone records and pull the GPS records from Tim's first degree attempted murder. And this time, when they got Colleen into the interrogation, and his trial starts in May of 2022. Oh no,